Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. In our previous episode, we recapped how the British geneticist Herbert Wyndham and the American arachnologist Jonathan Drew joined forces to build a technologically advanced citadel of science on Wundagore Mountain in the Balkan nation of Transia. However, after his daughter fell ill from radiation poisoning and his wife was killed by some unknown creature prowling the countryside, Jonathan disappeared, leaving his partner alone. Wyndham went out in search of the creature that slaughtered Miriam Drew, only to be attacked by what could only be described as a wolfman. Fortunately, the morning sun drove the creature away, and while Wyndham was injured, he survived to speculate on the nature of the creature. Had someone else managed to duplicate his genetic accelerator? Or was the monster more supernatural in nature? In either event, he would need something to protect himself, and got to work constructing a suit of armor capable of fending off the beast. And while he did not consider himself superstitious, he covered his bases by giving the protective armor a silver plating. This was not a moment too soon, as that very night the werewolf attacked, killing one of the Moloid workers. The now armored Herbert Wyndham was able to defeat and capture the monster, but the Moloids took their fallen comrade away and never returned to Wyndham's service. Meanwhile, the following morning, the werewolf reverted back to human form, and Wyndham learned that the creature was in fact Gregor Rusoff, the local baron he had purchased land from. Rusoff explained that his family line had been burdened with the curse of lycanthropy, causing him to transform on the 3 nights surrounding the full moon. And so Wyndham agreed to keep Rusoff safely locked up during his transformations in exchange for the opportunity to study his bizarre condition. And over the following months, Wyndham perfected his genetic accelerator and began evolving various animals into humanoid form. This race of sapient animals became known as the New Men, the first of which included the likes of Tagar, Porga, and Bova. To accomplish this, Wyndham briefly employed an assistant by the name of Miles Warren. However, Warren was banished from Wundagore for using Wyndham's technology to perform his own unauthorized experiments. Decades later, Warren would become one of Spider-Man's deadliest enemies as the villainous Jackal. Despite the hiccup with Warren, things were going well in Wundagore when Jonathan Drew suddenly returned, or so it seemed. In reality, Drew was possessed by the spirit of a 6th century sorcerer named Magnus. Back in medieval times, Magnus served the infamous sorceress Morgan Le Fay as a member of her cult, the Darkholders, who sought to resurrect the ancient demon Chthon. For those who watched my video on the Son of Satan, Chthon was one of the few original Elder Gods who survived the God Eater's purge of Earth. He exiled himself to a dark netherrealm to escape destruction, but before he did, Chthon left behind a collection of writings that eventually became the Book of Sin known as the Darkhold. Using the evil tome, Morgan Le Fay's Dark Coven succeeded in summoning the Elder God to Earth, but were of course unable to control him. They attempted to banish Chthon back to his nether realm, but succeeded only in binding his spirit within Mount Wundagore, the same mountain on which Herbert Wyndham had now built his fortress. Seeing the danger the Darkhold posed to the world, Magnus stole away the Book of Sin. And despite being a powerful magic user, when Morgan Le Fay learned of Magnus's betrayal, she killed him with her bare hands. Meanwhile, the Darkhold passed through many hands over the centuries until it finally came into the possession of one Gregor Rusoff. And during that time, Magnus's spirit remained on Earth, keeping watch for any sign of Chthon's return. When Jonathan Drew passed by the spirit's place of residence in London, Magnus read his mind and learned that he and Wyndham had built their citadel atop the demon's prison. And so the ghost of Magnus inhabited the body of Jonathan Drew in order to warn Herbert Wyndham of the danger lurking beneath their feet. When Wyndham refused to leave, Magnus decided to stay, and over the following decades he tutored the new men in the fighting styles and traditions of the medieval knights. And thus, the Knights of Wundagore were formed, with Herbert Wyndham becoming their Lord High Evolutionary. It is around this time that a pregnant woman named Magda came to Wundagore seeking refuge. There's a lot to unpack here, so who this woman was and where she came from will be discussed in more detail in a future episode. Shortly after this, Magnus's fears were nearly realized when Gregor Russoff attempted to use the Darkhold to cure himself of his lycanthropy. Reading the evil tome so close to Chthon's resting place allowed the demon to seize control of Russoff and force him to begin reciting a spell that would allow him to rise again. The High Evolutionary and his Knights of Wundagore attempted to hold off the encroaching Elder God, and many new men were killed in the ensuing conflict. Meanwhile, Magnus briefly abandoned the form of Jonathan Drew and inhabited Gregor Russoff's body, stopping the spell and beginning the counterspell. Chthon struck down the Baron in an attempt to stop this, but while Russoff died, the spirit of Magnus was able to complete the ritual and reseal the demon within Mount Wundagore. While Gregor Russoff died that night, he had already passed on the werewolf's curse to his son, who in turn passed it on to his own child, Jack Russell, the modern-day werewolf by night. It was also supposedly that night that Magda gave birth. However, we now know that the twins, who were supposedly Magda's children, were actually abducted by the High Evolutionary for genetic experimentation. In either case, as Chthon was defeated, he imbued one of the babies with a piece of his own power, instilling great magical potential within her. Despite believing that the two children were in fact hers, the following morning Magda disappeared, leaving only a note saying that she feared if she remained alive, her husband might one day discover the children. And so, after the High Evolutionary had completed his experiments involving the children, he delivered them to the Romani couple, Django and Maria Maximoff, who had recently lost twins of their own. The Maximoffs raised young Pietro and Wanda as their own children, and eventually the genetic potential instilled in these two by the High Evolutionary manifested, and they later became Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. However, despite Magda's sacrifice, the man who was her husband did eventually find the twins, and for some time all three of them believed that they were his children, the children of the man called Magneto. However, the true parentage of the Maximoff twins is a topic for another day, and so we now turn our attention back to Mount Wundagore. Following Chthon's defeat, Magnus decided it was time for him to return to his grave and relinquish control of Jonathan's body. And so, once again, the High Evolutionary was left alone with his children, the new men. Fortunately, after years of treatment in suspended animation, Jonathan Drew's young daughter, Jessica, finally recovered and was then looked after by the motherly cow woman, Bova. Several years later, Wyndham came to realize that it would behoove him to provide his knights with an education of the modern world, as they had been hidden away in isolation for decades. And so, Tagar and Porgia, two of his earliest and most trusted new men, as well as the most human-like in appearance, were dispatched to recruit a teacher capable of the task. The person they found was an American nurse by the name of Jane Foster. And by bringing her to Wundagore, they also led her ally and lover, the mighty Thor, to come searching for her. Meanwhile, the High Evolutionary was attempting to evolve a wolf using a new kind of mutagenic isotope. However, the experiment went awry, and the resulting new man became the terrifying and hateful Man-Beast. The Man-Beast evolved a small army of followers to rebel against his creator, but with Thor fighting alongside them, the Knights of Wundagore were able to defeat the evil new men. However, these creatures did not ask to be created, and so rather than destroy them, the High Evolutionary banished the Man-Beast and his followers to the stars. Furthermore, Wyndham realized that his work would constantly put humanity at risk, and so with the hidden rockets concealed within his citadel, the High Evolutionary and the Knights of Wundagore also left the Earth to find a new home. Only the motherly Bova chose to stay behind to deliver Jessica to an orphanage so she could be among her own kind, and to carry the secrets of what had happened on Mount Wundagore. Reaching a livable but uninhabited world, the High Evolutionary and the new men established the colony of Wundagore II. There, each knight was given a mate evolved from the same species, and the new men were allowed to go out and establish their own culture. However, several months later, an injured Porga reported to the High Evolutionary that things had gone horribly wrong. Left unsupervised, the new men had grown violent and barbaric. The High Evolutionary was forced to fight to destroy his own children, even going so far as to abduct the Incredible Hulk to use against them. However, in the ensuing battle, Wyndham was mortally wounded. Shedding his armor, he attempted a desperate gambit, attempting a new form of evolution upon himself, transforming himself into a powerful being of pure energy. Before departing, the High Evolutionary used the powers of his new form to undo what he had done, transforming the Knights of Wundagore back to their original animal forms. He then left Wundagore II, his mind and body becoming one with the universe itself. However, while his intellect was great, his mind was still ultimately human, and the vastness of infinity threatened to drive him to madness. And so, to preserve his sense of self, the High Evolutionary voluntarily transformed himself back to human form, restoring his armor while retaining many of the abilities his evolved state afforded him. After this, the High Evolutionary decided to create a new world where he could continue his experiments. A counter-Earth orbiting the opposite side of the solar system, just enough out of phase with reality to be completely undetectable. However, shortly before beginning this grand experiment, the High Evolutionary discovered a mysterious cocoon floating in the vacuum of space. For the secret within this cocoon, the creation of Counter-Earth, and the return of the Man-Beast, be sure to check out my video on the Origin of Adam Warlock, which is already up on the channel right now. And don't forget to join me next time and learn what became of Magnus' alleged children when we discuss the origin of the Scarlet Witch. But thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you all for getting the channel to 10,000 subscribers. To celebrate this occasion, I am going to be streaming a full playthrough of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 over on twitch.tv/MaryMarvelite on Sunday, November 22nd. I'll be taking audience questions and giving away free gift subs, so I hope to see you guys there. Just check the pinned comment below for more details. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!